We have Anna Wilson next, who is there. Anna, do you want to? Hello, Anna Wilson.
Hi, sorry, I was just switching to presenter mode. I missed your introduction, Angus. Yes. Sorry, but
well, I haven't done it yet. So
sorry.
Anna Wilson from the UK is going to be talking about bringing people and nature together, inspiring action through wetland center interpretation. And Anna is from the WWT, the Wildlife and Fowls, sorry, the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust. And the WWT has been bringing people together with nature and delivering wetland interpretation for 75 years. But in 2021, the challenges are greater than ever, as well as the ongoing impacts of COVID-19 pandemic. The world is facing a climate crisis, a nature crisis, and an emerging well-being crisis. The interpretation work of the WWT has to work hard to inspire people to action, to become ambassadors for the environment, and to drive a blue recovery. So by presenting case studies from the latest interpretation of the WWT's own wetland centers, and also from their international community-based ecotourism projects, and some work they do in bringing networks of wetland interpreters together, Anna's presentation will explore how wetland centers can be an effective way of raising awareness, creating a learning environment, and inspiring action. So Anna, just briefly, has an MA in Museum and Heritage Management and has over 15 years of experience delivering visitor experiences, exhibitions, projects, events, and learning programs internationally and in the UK, both as a consultant and whilst working for a variety of museum, heritage, and environmental organizations, including the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust, the British Museum, and Shakespeare Birthplace Trust. And I know she's worked in China also on wetland projects. So it'll certainly be interesting. I've been aware of the work of the WWT for some years now. I think it's an exemplary shop for interpretive consultancy work. Their office has been working on not only WWT projects, but also for other people over the years, other organizations. And my special interest is, as an interpretive designer, is how actually the interpretive plans are put into effect, what you actually experience out there, how they manifested the great ideas which were in the interpretive plan. So I think there'll be plenty of these ideas in Anna's talk. And well, 2 years ago, before COVID, I visited actually the Barnes wetland in London, which was, I think, the very first for the WWT. And it's a great place. On one hand, you have the animals down here and the installations and the guides and the great atmosphere. And over the top, you've got jumbo jets landing all the time, which is very, very telling about the challenges facing nature conservation and interpretation of nature these days. So I look forward to what you have to show us. Over to you, Anna.
Right, thank you ever so much. Can you just confirm that you can see my slides before I
yes, we can.
Dive right in? Okay, let me just start this. Well, thank you very much for that very thorough introduction. And also thank you to Interpret Europe for letting me speak here today. It's not easy holding a conference virtually, but I've really enjoyed this weekend so far, and I've been very inspired. I'm very excited to be talking with you today and hoping to return just a little bit of that inspiration. So my name's Anna Wilson. I'm a principal consultant at WWT, the Wildfowl Wetlands Trust. And I want to dive right in and start this presentation by really talking about WWT, who we are, where we come from. It's an organisation I'm very proud to work for. And as I said, my plan for today is to give you a real whistle-stop tour around to look at the many different ways we use interpretation. at WWT and why we do it. So we're a wetland conservation charity. We're based in the UK, but we work all over the world. So how do we bring people and nature together, and how do we inspire action is what I want to sort of pick at today. But before that, I want to take this story back to the very beginning, and that's the wetlands themselves. What are wetlands? What are they? And why do they matter? And so I've got a very short video to kick us off with. It's just over 2 minutes long. It's from our talented media team, and it explains that much better than I could hope to. So hopefully this will play for you. Oh, did I kill it? I think I killed it. Sorry, I'll try again. So WWT has a big job and an ambitious vision. It wants to create a world where healthy wetland nature thrives and enriches lives. And this is our mission statement. It says we conserve, restore, create wetlands, we save wetlands. And this is the really crucial bit for me. We want to inspire everyone to value the amazing things that healthy wetlands achieve for people and nature. You know, we have to bring people along with us on this conservation journey. And that goes back to this man who I will talk about quite a bit in this presentation. This is Sir Peter Scott, who many of you will know. He was the son of the Antarctic explorer, Captain Scott. He was an ornithologist, an artist. He was an inventor. He competed at the Olympics, and he was a conservationist. And he established the Wildfowl Wetlands Trust in 1946. So as Angus said, this is our 75th year, which is very exciting. And I use this slide a lot if you've seen me speak before, but I love this. He said that the most effective way to save the threatened and decimated natural world is to cause people to fall in love with it again, with its beauty and reality. He was one of the first people to recognise the power of television in bringing wildlife into people's homes. You know, in the UK, we have a brilliant tradition of BBC natural history television programmes that get exported all around the world. But Peter Scott presented the first BBC natural history programme. But first and foremost, he believed that the best way to do this, to get people to fall back in love with nature, was to give them first-hand experiences of it. So using a tool that we know as interpretation. He not only set up WWT to save and protect species and habitats, which it does, but he also created our first wetland centre, and that was in Slimbridge in Gloucestershire in the UK. So nowadays, including Slimbridge, WWT has 10 wetland centres. We've got one in all of the 4 countries of the UK with visitor facilities and programmes in place. And this would be a really good time to give a definition of a wetland centre. It's a term I put in the title of my talk, but it can be misleading because it makes it sound like it has to be a building, a physical structure. Well, actually, we define a wetland centre as a place or places where there is interaction between people and wetlands, especially wetland life, with either an educational or an interpretive objective. So there might be many people on this call from places that actually meet that definition, but wouldn't necessarily class themselves as a wetland centre. So whether you're a bigger landscape that have forests and parklands and other habitats as well, but you do engage people with wetlands at some point on your site. Or on contrast, you might not have a building at all, like thinking of the example of the Wadden Sea that we learnt about yesterday, just getting people out on a tour to engage them with mudflats and wetlands. So for our centres, they vary. So we do have large facilities at Slimbridge, at the London Wetland Centre in Barnes, but we also have sites like Steart Marshes, which is a fascinating, beautiful wetland landscape where we don't have buildings other than a few hides, but still operate this programme of engagement. And of course, we do have a large wetland conservation unit. They work all over the world on such a broad range of stuff, research, action projects, initiatives, and consulting services. And their work crosses over with interpretation, much more than perhaps you would imagine. And there will be more on that in a little while. But the world has certainly changed a lot since 1946 when Slimbridge opened its doors, and particularly for wetlands, the situation is pretty bleak. Now I want to repeat a couple of the statistics that were in that opening video that I shared with you. I thought it was quite interesting. I noticed, I think it was the keynote speech yesterday talking about the Future of Tourism Coalition. In the crises that were listed that are affecting the tourism industry, deforestation was listed as one of these. Well, globally, wetlands are disappearing 3 times faster than forests. Nearly 35% of the world's wetlands have been destroyed since 1970. That's over a third within the lifetime of many people on this call. So it's quite stark. Sort of meanwhile, the world is increasingly full of more and more information, of media, of communication, and organisations face so much competition for their visitors' leisure time, for attention, for the support and the money. And our visitors that do come to our wetland centres have never had higher expectations of us. So how do we give them meaningful engagement with nature? How do we turn them into supporters? And ultimately, how do we inspire the next generation of wetland advocates? So I've got a number of case studies taking you through different areas of our work, some things that I've worked on and some that I've witnessed and some that I've just heard about from very talented colleagues. So here goes, I hope I can do them justice. But we start at Slimbridge, one of our own wetland centres, our first one. For those of you that don't know it, it's in the southwest of England, and it's on the tidal estuary of the River Severn, which is the longest river in the UK. And the wetland reserves around Slimbridge are of international importance. They're designated, and it's one of the reasons why Sir Peter Scott chose this site to base not only the wetland centre, but the headquarters of WWT. You know, every year, up to 30,000 wild ducks, geese, swans and waders migrate to Slimbridge for the winter, which is a fantastic spectacle. And before COVID, over 250,000 visitors a year came to Slimbridge to connect with nature. And the last few years have been very busy for Slimbridge. So in 2016, we received a very generous grant from our National Lottery Heritage Fund, which went towards a £6 million project to transform the visitor experience at Slimbridge. And this project has seen the development and the creation of 8 large new visitor exhibits and experiences, along with other things, to allow visitors to explore and celebrate the incredible life and work of Sir Peter Scott and his legacy. It was supposed to be a 3-year project and was originally called Slimbridge 2020, still is sometimes, because everything was supposed to open last year, the great unveiling. But as you can imagine, and with many, many places, COVID-19 forced Slimbridge to close and work stopped for a year. So the project was rebranded Slimbridge 75 for our 75th anniversary this year. And the last of the exhibits to open did so this summer. We've just had our big sort of end of project launch. You know, it's been a great thing to happen now, to market as we try and reopen and bring our audiences back. But having said that, since reopening, all of our visitor centres, even the ones without the sort of shiny new exhibits, have been busy. So I think anecdotally there is a desire anyway, certainly in the UK, to get back out into nature and natural visitor spaces. And we've seen that in our visitation. But what are these exhibits? Well, I've got pictures of 3 of them here, just to give you a little bit of a flavour of the types of stuff we've got going on. So there's the Living Wetland Theatre and the Waterscapes Aviary, which is the top left picture. And you can see that big aviary behind the sort of entrance signage there, which is where visitors can walk around and witness a celebration of UK wetlands, from estuaries to marsh, wet woodland, reed beds. It's a very beautiful and lovely space to walk around, and you can see a number of wonderful UK wetland birds like avocets and spoonbills. The bottom left, there's a new accessible tower hide, which has a lift, which is brilliant, because it means more and more people can get up into this tower hide, and that gives you views across the Severn estuary to see out into the wider reserve, to give you visual access to the places that you can't necessarily walk in, and see some more of the wild birds. And then on the right, a really exciting part of this project has been to see Peter Scott's home, which is on site where he lived and worked along with his family. It's been turned into a museum. Well, everything that was in it has been properly documented and recorded and accessioned, and now visitors can go on a tour of this space. And this view may be a familiar one to many, because this is him as he was when he presented that first ever natural history programme, which began in 1953 from his home. This is his study. And if you go on the tour, this is what you will see today. So very little has changed in some respects from 1950s, and people feel like they can really walk into that film set that they remember seeing, as well as seeing things like his kitchen and where he lived and where he raised his family. Now, there were 2 of the Slimbridge exhibits that I really wanted to delve into a little bit more detail with you on. But before I do that, I thought it would be useful to share our key messages with you. And as I'm sure everyone on this conference is very aware, sort of having clear key messages, along with other things such as understanding your audiences, is one of the cornerstones of our interpretation planning. And WWT developed these just sort of very simple messages a few years ago, along with guidelines for our staff and volunteers. And they've been a really useful framework for our communication. You know, everything we do, whatever stories we tell, we should be communicating one or more of these 5 things. Now, the ones that I think we're really good at already are the three that say wetlands are amazing, that wetlands are useful to us, and that wetlands are threatened. I think things they came across in things like the video that I opened my presentation with. I think the other two, we've not always been as strong at, particularly in our visitor interpretation, in communicating. And that is telling people that WWT is saving wetlands. You know, a lot of people come to us and just think we're a visitor attraction, and letting people know that they can help save wetlands too. You know, what's that call to action? So getting back into Slimbridge 75, I mentioned at the start of my talk all the work that our conservation team does. And like I say, this isn't always visible or apparent to our visitors, but we are now trying to embed conservation stories in some of our new exhibits. And it's with this in mind that I've picked these two experiences to show you a little bit more. Now this one is our Arctic adventure. It was the first to open, or one of the first, in 2019. So it has had a number of visitors that have been able to come through it and experience it before COVID shut us down. And it's a replica hut. It's modelled on a hut that WWT scientists live in when they conduct fieldwork in the Arctic tundra. And it's been really effective in introducing our conservation work to our visitors. So what is that conservation work? Well, in this case, it's research on the Buick swans. They spend their summers breeding in northern Russia before migrating nearly 4,000 kilometres to spend their winters in the UK at sites like Slimbridge. And their numbers have dropped by a third in recent years. And so our scientists are working along the migration route, including at the breeding sites in the tundra, to study the swans, to understand and to ultimately combat the reasons for their decline. And this is the inside of the hut. It aims to create an immersive and, importantly, an authentic experience. And hasn't authenticity just really been, I think, for me, the buzzword of this conference? I've heard it mentioned so many times, and it is so important. And one of the reasons for the Arctic adventure, for the Tundra Hut success, is, I think, the level of detail that has gone into it. It's really quite impressive, and it's not only to show visitors about the science that happens, and of course you can do this, you can test your skills, you can study bird leg identification rings, you can measure birds, you can do activities like animal poo and analysis, all very important. But it also shows how conservation scientists live during a fieldwork expedition. You know, there are authentic smells here. There's sort of boiled cabbage and potatoes, which would be lunch for the researchers. You can delve deeper into conditions, living conditions, food rations, the clothing worn by a researcher. You know, the interpretation team worked so closely with the conservation team on this project to get this right. And as we all know, as Michael kicked us off by telling us today in his opening to today's conference, real human stories are powerful. They're so powerful in interpretation. And it's not always easy to build in human stories to a nature attraction, but they are crucial to engage visitors with our conservation messages. And this is one of my favourite things that I think the Arctic Adventure gets right. It's full of personal stories, real ones, of anecdotes, first-person accounts, and of real images donated by staff. And this is a wall in the Tundra Hut showing WWT scientists going back to Sir Peter Scott, whose own drawings of the Buick swans at Slimbridge were the start of this project, really. And of course, anybody visiting Slimbridge during the winter can learn about the Buick swans research in the Tundra Hut and then go out and see the birds themselves on site. And I must admit that this view of the Buicks at Slimbridge is is one that I'm really looking forward to this winter. The swans at Slimbridge are a magical thing, and I can't overemphasize that. And last winter with COVID, I worked at home. I didn't go and I didn't see them. And I put this slide into this presentation the other week, and it made me realize that I think I'd taken for granted how much I missed seeing this view. But moving on from swans, the other exhibit from Slimbridge 75 that I wanted to share with you also starts with a Peter Scott story. And this one is from the 1950s, when the Hawaiian goose, or also known as the nene, and you can see nenes here, it was close to extinction due to things like the introduction of predators and the loss of habitat in Hawaii. And with just 30 nenes left in the world, Peter Scott began to successfully breed them in captivity and release them back into the wild. And nowadays the world population is 3,000. So this is a really nice success story. And it's around this story that we enter our Mission Possible exhibit or experience, which creates a little bit of 1950s Hawaii to introduce this story. The whole exhibition here talks about how we're saving species and their wetlands, basically. But it starts in Hawaii, and you can walk around. It's got sort of fake volcanic lava and a little bit of a golf course, demonstrating both the natural and human impacts on the landscape that have threatened this goose. And you learn about why it was endangered. And this image is also a really good reminder for me to mention that we're very fortunate, well, in the UK, that we have this culture of volunteering, and we do have a lot of very talented and dedicated volunteers at Slimbridge that welcome visitors to these exhibits. They take you on the tours of Sir Peter Scott's house. They're on site at the different experiences to welcome and talk people through these stories, and that makes such a big difference. As you go round, you head into a duckery, and we have real duckeries at Slimbridge where our conservation breeding team work, and this is what they look like on the inside. You can see some of the groundbreaking techniques Sir Peter Scott developed, and you can see how we still apply his science today when breeding birds for conservation. And of course, first-hand experience of birds. You get to see newly reared ducklings in the duckery. These ones aren't nenes, but if you walk around the rest of the exhibit, you'll see many of our adult nene collection wandering around, and for many people, feeding the nenes at Slimbridge is one of the core bits of the Slimbridge experience. So you can do that too. And then the second part of the Mission Possible experience moves on, and it takes us to Madagascar to look at a current conservation project that our team is still working on today. And it's around this little brown duck that's quite unextraordinary looking. It's the Madagascan pochard, but its story, its importance is that until 2006, the whole world believed that this duck had long gone extinct. There weren't any left until there was a surprise discovery, and 20 of them were found on a very remote, very polluted lake in Madagascar. It's remarkable that they were living there. They had no right to it, and the whole habitat was in a right mess, and there was all sorts of threats to them from both pollution and predators. But there were 20 of them, and there was a glimmer of hope, and an operation to save this species was quickly launched by WWT and a number of partners to stop them disappearing altogether. So Mission Madagascar tells the story of this rescue, from collecting some of the eggs from these remaining last few birds to hatching the first ducklings in a makeshift setup in a hotel bathroom. And I'm assured by colleagues who worked there that this is a very accurate reconstruction of that Madagascar hotel bathroom that, and this is amazing, at one point it held 25% of the whole world's population of that species. And so again, authenticity is key to this experience, with humour, but also with the story. There's peril and drama and adversity all playing an important part, and you might be able to see some of the text on a couple of these photos, you know, storms, broken bridges, illness. We watch as a Madagascar harrier sweeps, snatching them, that's snatching the ducklings. The story is a great one, and the work has continued. You know, if the birds were to be successfully released into the wild, they needed a suitable wetland to live on, and in 2006 there wasn't one. Eventually, after a lot of work and research, Lake Sophia in Madagascar was identified as the only place with any potential, but it was far from perfect. So we've done a lot of work with communities to improve the wetland, both for people and wildlife, through education, sustainable fishing and agricultural practices, things like that. And 21 birds were released back into the wild in Lake Sophia in December 2018, and they bred. So 12 ducklings were sighted in 2019. So the specialist breeding work is really only a small part of a wider and much more holistic level of work that we're doing to improve Madagascar's wetlands for people and wildlife. But seeing the ducks back in the wild is proof that wetland conservation is succeeding in making this part of the world a better place to live. And just about to leave Slimbridge 75, but a reminder of that fifth key message, that you can help save wetlands too. And this is the exit of Mission Possible. We're getting better at letting people know what they can do for wetlands in our visitor interpretation, as well as in our broader content, reminding them what they're already doing. For example, you know, your visit counts, but how they can do more too. And just very quickly, and linked to that, I just wanted to mention, although it strays slightly from interpretation, but this is a big campaign being run at the moment by WWT, which you too, if you wish to, can get behind and support. The campaign says wetlands need you. The COVID crisis has taught us that we can't go back to how things were before. How do we fight back against the climate emergency? How can we reverse the destruction of nature? How can we protect our communities from flooding? How can we heal the well-being crisis? Well, wetlands can. So the Wetlands Can campaign is a bit different to others we've run before. It's bigger, it's cross-organisational, and it's all over our social media at the moment with the hashtag, which is why I really wanted to sort of flag it up. You know, it's doing something different this time. It's actually just asking people to join our movement to help push towards what we're calling a blue recovery. So most importantly, it's asking for signatories to a pledge to support wetlands. It's a UK focused one, but the support it gathers, we can campaign for change and urge the UK government to prioritise and invest in more wetlands. So if you're interested in that, the details are there. You wouldn't have to go far to find that on our online presence. But I'm going to leave Slimbridge now and talk about another way in which we connect people with nature, and that's through our formal learning programme. And this is an area that I must admit I do not work very closely with, but our National Learning Manager gave a presentation on this particular project in my department a few weeks back, and it was just so good that I couldn't not mention it today. So here goes. It's called Generation Wild, and it's a project that states it will connect 45,000 children and their families with nature, creating a generation that will carry forward a lifelong love of the natural world. So it's such an important project. You know, evidence shows that connecting with nature is really important for children. It makes them feel happier, it increases their self-esteem, improves behaviour, as well as physical and mental well-being. And then there are also some scary statistics here. So a couple of them. 75% of UK children spend less time outdoors than prison inmates, which is quite staggering. You know, it says in 2016, more than 1 in 9 children did not set foot in a park, forest, beach, or any other natural environment. I think that's another UK statistic. But children from disadvantaged communities often have even fewer opportunities. So that's what this project is really looking to address. It's working with schools, children, and families in these disadvantaged communities to inspire the next generation of nature lovers. And it's been built, it's a big project. It's been built in partnership with theatrical producers, creative technologists, artists, puppeteers, and it wants to offer a very unique and unforgettable experience. And activities go beyond those that simply engage people through knowledge acquisition. It wants to focus on those that foster a more meaningful and emotional connection with nature. And of course, for that, you need storytelling, and it all starts with a story. So imagine going on a school trip and stumbling across an enormous nest. So this is where children and their families meet Ava. She's an amazing girl with wings and feathery feet who wants to be their friend. She challenges them to discover the secrets of her story from the animals on site. And she's designed a magical listening device that children can use, and it will enable them to hear what the animals are saying. And then the children must carry out nature connection activities to show that they care about nature. And only then will the animals reveal their secrets. So following this day on site at a wetland centre with Ava, the journey continues via an interactive website, through nature activities in school grounds, in gardens, local green spaces. We know that it's children's teachers and families who ultimately are best able to facilitate a long-term connection with the natural world. So Generation Wild is supporting teachers and family members as they promote this lifelong love. And the website is lovely, so I very much recommend having a look at it. There's a lot of content that is freely available. You don't need to be part of the project or have a login, but you can see a bit more of Ava's story, see some of the fabulous illustrations that accompany it. You find out a bit more about the project, and there are activities there as well that anybody could do, families, if they wanted to connect with nature themselves. And something I haven't yet touched upon today, and it's an important one, so I don't want to miss it out, and that's evaluation. You know, how do we know this stuff is working? And like many organisations, we have a dedicated visitor services team. So we do carry out visitor survey, evaluation, which is really important to find out responses to visitors' engagement with us and what's working for them, what isn't. But something that we're really fortunate that we have and can use is we've got a scientific research department. And as well as having sort of teams that carry out research on species and habitats, we also have a team that research what we call social dimensions. So, for example, we have one person whose focus of their research is studying the benefits of wetlands to mental health and well-being. And it's this team who also work on some of our project evaluation, and they're working on evaluating Generation Wild, which is brilliant. So a partnership between WWT and Cardiff University's Department of Psychology is going to sort of systematically examine the impacts of Generation Wild on the people that take part in it. So it's going to look at the influence of different variables, such as socio-economic variables, lived experiences, and it's going to evaluate things like long-lasting nature connectedness, levels of care and concern, and pro-environmental behaviours. The work's not started yet, so unfortunately I can't really share the results. There's a new PhD student who started on Friday who's going to be carrying out the bulk of this work, and I think the school visits themselves started last week, and my colleague said that they were going well despite the rain. So we're really at the beginning, but it's going to be so great to have sort of scientifically rigorous methods applied to visitor evaluation, and I'm certainly very looking forward to seeing what the results are there. So branching out a little bit now, away from our own visitor centres and going out into the world, I want to introduce a different type of project. And this demonstrates a different thing that we've been talking so much in this year's Interpret Europe conference. And it's about how do we empower communities and how can interpretation be used to help make them more resilient. And for this project, we're going to Cambodia. A little bit of background. Cambodia is one of the world's most wetland dependent countries. Millions rely on the wetlands, particularly in the lower Mekong, for their survival. They live off the rice and the fish. They build homes on stilts. And also these breathtaking wetlands are also home to some of the world's rarest and most endangered species. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? But large areas of wetlands are being destroyed in Cambodia to support its fast growing economy. And this is having devastating effects on people and wildlife. So WWT has been working for some years now on two protected wetland areas in Cambodia. And they've been doing lots of different things. They've been working with farmers and fishers, looking at how people can earn a stable income while at the same time protecting the environment. We're helping communities to create associations to sustainably manage natural resources, which is supporting livelihoods, helping people produce climate resilient crops that use less water and don't need pesticide. So they're better for wetlands and also deliver better yields, which is just brilliant. So lots of good stuff like that. But the bits I wanted to flag up and is more relevant for what we're talking about is in An Lung Pring, which is one of those protective wetlands that we're working in. And here we've helped to set up a community-led ecotourism project, which before COVID was attracting hundreds of tourists who can travel to An Lung Pring. And in particular, they're going there to see the Sarus crane, which you can see in this picture here. Visitors can see flocks of up to 300 of this bird. It's a real wildlife spectacle, and they can discover more about the local communities that live alongside it. And so I've got a second video that I want to show you, which is just a little promo really for the community-led ecotourism, but it much better than I can explain it demonstrates the sort of offer. What would you get if you were to go there? So I'll just get this playing for you now.
Hello, I'm Bona. I'm guide to in Tibet. I want to say thank you for the help the wetland.
So again, this is, let's get rid of that. This is an example of local communities sharing their culture, bringing the human stories alongside the nature spectacle, and showing that sort of authentic thing about how people live in this really important landscape. Before COVID, the project was generating employment. It was bringing in thousands of dollars for local people, much needed money which could be invested into more reserve management and community projects. I mean, it wasn't getting everything right, I should say. The experience was very good, and the feedback, there's less evaluation here, but through things like anecdotally talking to the community and things like TripAdvisor, you see that people were really valuing the experience there. But seasonality is an issue because the cranes are only there for a few months. So it wasn't getting everything quite right, but then sadly the pandemic has stopped international tourism, and that's halted some of the work that this project is able to do altogether. The team, we have a team out in Cambodia, and they were already looking at how to improve this offer at An Luang Preng. Probably the most important thing that they were looking at was sort of branding and marketing. I have put the website up there, which you can look at. It probably does need a little bit more work to sort of explain what we're doing there and sell that visitor offer. But now, because of COVID, of course, they've had to work on a bit more of a business plan to sort of look at how they will fill the gap before international tourism starts again, because I think this site will ultimately need the international tourists to keep it going long term. But in the meantime, they're doing things like adapting the offer to appeal to a local audience, both Cambodians and also expats living in the country. And they've also taken on a number of different initiatives, which have been great. So this is one that really took off during the pandemic. It's a great one. It's locals using an out-of-control invasive species. In this case, it's mostly the water hyacinth, and using traditional weaving, local weaving techniques to make bags and products out of this species. And this exclusive range of bags is available from the shops in the UK in WWT's own wetland centres. So it's a really great way of bringing some of our interpretive messaging into our retail. You know, the bags raise awareness of our work, they raise money for our projects, and they are actively removing problem species from the wetlands in Cambodia. So WWT is, or certainly tries to be, a very outward-looking organisation. You know, we have this ambitious vision, that big mission, and we can't do that all on our own. You know, I've talked about lots of different areas of our work already, and of course there have been so many partners involved in that work alone. But it's important for us that anybody who lives in or works in or visits a wetland, and that's any wetland, not just our own ones, we want them to have a positive experience of that place. And so for the final little section of my talk today, I just want to talk about some of the ways in which we support other organisations to engage people with their own wetland messages and their own wetland places. And the first I want to mention is something that's led by, we have a small but very dynamic international engagement team, and one of their jobs is to facilitate networks. And this one is the one I want to sort of flag up today. It's Wetland Link International. The acronym is WLI, but we all just call it WELI, which is also a word that is an abbreviation of a Wellington boot or a gum boot that you'd wear for walking in the wet. So it's a nice name. And WELI is a global support network for, well, it says it's for wetland education centres that deliver engagement activities on site. But that definition of a wetland centre that I used right at the beginning of my talk came from WELI. It doesn't have to be a building. Wetland centres come in all shapes and sizes, as I said. So anyone that just wants to engage people with wetland through education and interpretation. And another birthday, happy birthday, WELI. It's 30 this year. It was created in 1991. And it's led by WWT, and now in its 30th year has 350 members over 6 continents. And its objectives include things like advocating for and assisting in development of new wetland centres or wetland programmes. It wants to help people improve the effectiveness of operations through sharing, training, expertise exchange, and it lobbies for the greater inclusion of, shall we say, sort of interpretation and education within wider wetland and conservation initiatives. And it does this to support the development of frameworks for implementation at national, regional, and global levels. And WELI is also delivered with a broad range of partners, and we work through regional initiatives mainly to engage wetland centres, networks and representatives around the world. These are broadly sort of continental, and these groups know their regions better than we do, so they can help advise and develop good communication and resources that are much more effective locally. But it starts with the website. WELI works predominantly through its website, and here's the good bit: it's completely free. Members may be government or non-government. They may be professional, amateur, paid, voluntary. It doesn't matter. Anyone who needs or can share practical advice on activities related to wetland interpretation can join. So there may be people out there that also want to join, and so do go to the website and fill in a form. We ask our members to be active. We want them to share resources and advice. We want this to be a multi-directional network, not just us spouting. And in return, we also provide resources. And to be honest, these are just freely available on the website. You don't even have to log in or be a member. But it provides those regional network links, sharing best practice. It helps improve access to funding and resources. And there's a suite of communication updates, members webinars and things like that. So that's certainly something that I'd recommend if you work in wetlands at all. And then finally, my sort of penultimate slide is to finish by saying another way we work with other organisations is through consultancy, where any organisation wishing to use interpretation to connect people with their wetlands can hire our services and expertise, no matter how big or small the project. And this is actually my main role. Predominantly, it's what I've been doing for the last 5 years since I joined WWT. And well, Angus introduced my background experience very succinctly at the beginning. I didn't come from conservation. I've worked at a variety of museums and heritage organisations in the UK, from giving cave tours to developing temporary exhibitions to running visitor services and digital engagement as well. I came to WWT 5 years ago knowing barely anything about wetlands, let alone how amazing they are. And since then, I've worked on some brilliant projects, and I've just put a couple of examples here to give you a flavour of the type of projects we do for other organisations. So I started at Julongkou Wetland Park, my first project in China, where we did an interpretation plan and design, including an architectural design, developed at the same time as the interpretation. And that's an example of where we only work to concept stage. And And so I don't know how that project ended up. It's one of the drawbacks of consultancy, is you don't always see the outcome. Sometimes you do, and my most recent project in China is Yancheng Wetland Park, where we've worked with a partner in China to design and build a completely new wetland park, which is celebrating the recent inscription of the Yancheng Yellow Sea coastline being inscribed to World Heritage. And then there's other stuff there closer to home, from feasibility studies, if you want to know whether even a new wetland centre is a good idea, to design and build, and training as well. So that's me. I will stop there now, I promise. I'm a complete wetland convert. This is me on a recent holiday to Scotland with my brand new binoculars, my first pair of binoculars, spotting seals on the coast of Arran. So that brings me to the end, and I hope there was something there for everyone. I've sort of jammed probably way too much in, but I hope it sparks an interest or an idea. And I'm sorry there's no time for questions, but you are more than welcome to contact me. I'm keeping an eye on the conference messaging. My email address is there. I'm on LinkedIn. And if nothing else, I hope this has inspired you to value wetlands and the amazing wetlands that exist in your countries. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. That was an enormous amount of fascinating insight into your work. And I think for me, a great flag up for the importance of good design also in interpretation, both graphic design and design of experiences. I think your organization is a great example for that. And also the importance, the parallel importance of not only individual activism, which you encourage, and there's a question from Michael about this, you know, whether you're getting the volunteers. Perhaps you can speak to him privately about that later. And also the organizational activism and the lobbying, which is so important also for getting change to happen. From the historical point of view, Sir Peter Scott was starting after the Second World War, also a pivotal time in the history of our existence on Earth, really, you know, rebuilding after the war. When I was a child, game reserves were what these places were called. And then in 1977 in Kenya, where I was born, they banned hunting and they changed it to wildlife reserves. So a pivotal change. And then later in the 1980s, we had a strong focus on personality animals, you know, star animals, and it went on into habitat, actually, the preservation of habitats. And you have both the wildfowl and the wetland in one, which is essential. The people love the feathered personalities, but they can only exist if you preserve the habitat. And so I'd like to leave everyone with one thought to be pondering about. We obviously have another pivotal moment now. After COVID, we've all had time to think about relaunching or rethinking what we're doing, and which thoughts, your project 2020 was probably planned before the COVID. It'd be interesting to know what you would do if you got another huge budget like that. What would you do differently? And in the next years is the time when we all have to really implement these thoughts and insights which we've gained during this little respite, this moment, this time of contemplation, and into the crisis period ahead. So thank you very, very much. Lots of inspiration, lots of interesting thoughts and visions there.